Okay, so picture this. A creature. A blur of muscle and spots. Capable of hitting 120 kilometers per hour.
The fastest land mammal on Earth.
Exactly, the Asiatic cheetah. It used to roam the plains of India, a master of the hunt.
Ah.
But, and this is the thing, if you go looking for one in the wild today, you won't find it.
You can't. It's gone.
It was declared extinct in India way back in 1952. Gone. And here's the kicker, and the reason we're here today. India is, one of the world's richest countries when it comes to biological diversity.
A mega-diverse country is the term.
And yet, nearly 10% of our recorded wild flora and 20% of our mammals are currently on the threatened list.
It's a really sobering statistic to start with. I mean, we pride ourselves on our natural heritage, right?
Yeah.
The tigers, the elephants, the peacocks. But the data suggests we're burning through that inheritance at an alarming rate.
And the story of the cheetah, it's not just some tragedy from the past.
No, it's a flashing red warning light for the present.
Exactly. And that is what we're going to unpack today. Welcome, learners, to a very special edition of the Deep Dive, brought to you by Simplified UPSC by PPP. Today, our mission is, well, it's crystal clear.
We're doing a comprehensive sort of line-by-line breakdown of NCERT Class 10 Geography, Chapter 2, Forest and Wildlife Resources.
But, and this is important, we are not just reading a textbook at you.
Oh, absolutely not. That would be a huge waste of your time.
Not at all. This is a strategic analysis. It's tailored specifically for you, the UPSC aspirant. We are going to link every single concept directly to previous year questions, the PYQs, to show you exactly how this material shows up in the exams. We want to make sure that by the time you're done listening to this, you have the content for a really solid may-needs answer on conservation conflicts and the factual recall for those tricky prelim species questions.
It's all about connecting the dots, from the biology to the policy and then to the sociology of conservation. We have to move beyond just, memorizing names of animals.
Right.
We need to understand the systems that are at play here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, before we properly dive into this ocean of information, we do have a humble request. We put a lot of work into these deep dives to make your prep easier, more effective. If you find value in what we're doing, please subscribe to Simplified UPSC by PPP.
It helps us a lot. And if you are capable, please consider supporting us on Patreon. It really does help keep the lights on and allows us to keep bringing this super useful content to you.
And a massive, massive shout out to all of our current supporters.
Seriously, you are the reason this content creation is possible. We appreciate every single one of you.
We truly do. Thank you. Also, engage with us. Like the content. Share your valuable comments. It helps the algorithm find other learners just like you who need this kind of breakdown. And for the resources. Explicit notification here, guys. Free notes with practice PYQs are available on our Telegram channel. But if you want access to all the videos of this series, plus the premium notes.
And by premium, we're talking detailed notes, extra PYQs, and model mains answers.
All organized perfectly. Join our private Telegram library. Just DM us on the public Telegram channel to join.
Okay, business aside.
Let's get into the wild.
Let's do it. Where do we start? The absolute basics.
I think we have to. The building blocks. When we talk about resources in this chapter, the NCERT makes a very clear distinction. It's biotic versus abiotic.
Right. Biotic sounds like biology, so I'm guessing we're talking about living things.
Precisely. Biotic resources are things we get from the biosphere. They have life. So we're talking about human beings, flora, which is plants.
Fauna, animals.
Yep. Fauna, animals, fisheries, livestock, all the living engines of our ecosystem. And on the other hand, you have abiotic resources.
Non-living.
Composed of non-living things, rocks, metals, minerals. Simple enough.
And then there's this concept of renewability. We hear renewable energy all the time. Solar, wind. But forests are renewable too, right? They are, but, and this is a massive caveat, they are. Renewable resources are things that can be reproduced by physical, chemical, or mechanical processes, like solar energy or water. Forests and wildlife are biologically renewable.
So they can grow back?
They can grow back, but, and this is the big but, they can only renew themselves if we don't destroy them faster than they can regenerate.
That's the threshold.
That is the exact threshold India is struggling with right now. We're not just harvesting the interest from our natural capital, we're dipping into the principal.
Okay, so let's look at India's position specifically. We keep hearing that we are a mega-diverse country. What does that actually look like in the data? What does it mean?
It means immense richness. It's that simple. We have, diverse climates from the Himalayas to the coasts. We have diverse topographies, deserts, rainforests. And so, logically, we have diverse life. But that diversity is under great stress. And we aren't just losing numbers of animals, we're losing variety.
The genetic pool is shrinking.
Exactly. And to understand the scale of this problem, we need a standardized way to measure it. A way to ask, how much trouble is a species actually in?
And this is where the UPSC prelims examiners absolutely love to hang out.
Oh,
The
yeah.
IUCN classification.
The International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, they have a global system, the Red List, that categorizes species based on their survival status. You need to know these definitions cold.
Why so critical?
Because the difference between a statement saying a species is endangered versus vulnerable can be the difference between getting a question right or wrong in prelims. The nuance matters.
Okay, let's unpack them one by one. First step, normal species.
This is our baseline. These are species whose population levels are considered totally sufficient for their survival. Things are, well, normal.
So what are some examples?
Think of things you see commonly: cattle, sal trees, pine trees, or rodents. They're doing fine. Their birth rates match or exceed their death rates. No immediate threat.
Okay. Then we take a step into the danger zone. Endangered species.
And this is critical. These are species in danger of extinction. The key phrase the NCERT uses here is that survival is difficult if the negative factors that led to their decline continue to operate.
They're on the cliff edge, basically.
That's the perfect analogy. They are right on the edge.
Okay, give us the list. These are the names we need to have in our heads for the exam options.
For sure. We're talking about the black buck, the crocodile, the Indian wild ass, the Indian rhino.
The one-horned rhino.
The one-horned rhino, yes. The lion-tailed macaque and the sangai.
The sangai. That's the brow-antlered deer in Manipur, right? The dancing deer?
That's the one. No, hold on. You mentioned PYQs.
Yeah.
Let's link this right now. In the 2020 preliminary exam, question 75 asked, and I'm paraphrasing, which protected area is famous for conserving a subspecies of the Indian swamp deer, or barasingha, that thrives on hard ground?
A classic UPSC question. Very specific.
Incredibly specific. And the answer involves Kanha National Park in Madhya Pradesh. Now, the barasingha, like the sangai, falls into these threatened categories. The exam doesn't just ask, is it endangered?
No, it asks where it lives and what it eats.
Exactly. The question mentioned it was graminivorous, which just means grass-eating. The sangai we just mentioned lives on the floating biomass, the fungus, in Loktak Lake. You see how the exam requires you to know the specific habitats of these animals?
So just memorizing the list is level 1. Level 2 is knowing their address and their favorite food.
That's it. You have to visualize where they live.
Okay, so that's endangered. What's the next level down on the threat meter? Vulnerable species.
Vulnerable. This means the population has declined to levels where it is likely to move into the endangered category in the near future if, again, those negative factors keep going.
So they're not in the ER yet, but they're in the ambulance with the sirens on.
Perfect. That's a great way to think about it.
And the examples here.
We have the blue sheep, the Asiatic elephant, and the Gangetic dolphin.
Ah, the Gangetic dolphin. That comes up a lot in exams, too. It's often linked to river pollution levels, right? That's our national aquatic animal.
Correct. And notice the distinction there. The Indian rhino is endangered. It's in massive trouble. The Asiatic elephant is vulnerable. It's in trouble, but not as critical as the rhino just yet. These subtle differences are what they test in prelims statements.
Got it. Okay, next up, rare species. How is that different from vulnerable or endangered?
Good question. A rare species has a small population to begin with. It might be geographically localized or thinly scattered. They aren't necessarily dying out rapidly due to a specific new threat.
It's just that there were never that many of them to start with.
Exactly. And because their numbers are so low naturally, any negative change could easily push them into the endangered or vulnerable category.
What are we talking about here?
Examples would be the Himalayan brown bear, the wild Asiatic buffalo, the desert fox, and the hornbill.
I love hornbills. They're such distinct-looking birds.
And they're culturally significant in the Northeast. Being rare just means they're naturally scarce. You won't find a desert fox in every backyard. Their ecological niche is very specific.
Okay, that makes sense. Then we have endemic species. I think I know this one. It means they're local, right? Found only in one place.
Yes, precisely. Found only in particular isolated areas. Usually they're separated by natural or geographical barriers like islands or high mountain ranges.
The classic example being the Galapagos finches.
Right. And for India, the NCERT gives examples like the Andaman teal, the Nicobar pigeon, the Andaman wild pig.
I'm sensing a theme here. If you see Andaman or Nicobar in the name, It's a good bet it's endemic.
It's a very, very safe bet. Islands are like factories for endemic species because evolution happens in isolation there. The Mithun, a type of cattle in Arunachal Pradesh, is another great example.
And finally, the
Wow.
saddest category of all, extinct species.
Yes. These are species that are not found after exhaustive searches of their likely habitats. And this extinction can be at a local level, a countrywide level, or, a global level.
And the poster child for this in India is the animal we started with.
The Asiatic cheetah, the prime example. Also, the pink-headed duck.
The pink-headed duck, it sounds like something from a fantasy novel.
It was real, a diving duck native to the wetlands of the Gangetic Plains. But a combination of habitat loss and hunting just wiped it out. It hasn't been reliably seen since the 1930s.
This whole discussion about specific species reminds me of another PYQ. 2020, question 74, it just listed 4 names: Ceylon frogmouth, coppersmith barbet, gray-chinned minivet, and white-throated redstart. And it simply asked what they were.
And the answer was birds.
Right.
It seems almost too simple, but it's testing your breadth of knowledge. The NCERT textbook gives you names like Himalayan brown bear or Nicobar pigeon. UPSC expects you to have that same kind of familiarity with a wider range of biodiversity. You don't need to be an ornithologist.
But you should know that a minivet is a bird, not a reptile.
Exactly. It's about general awareness of our country's fauna.
And just one more link on this. 2015, a question on tropical wet evergreen forests and their locations, asking if they were found in Arunachal Pradesh, Himachal, Mizoram.
And that ties it all together.
Yeah.
You cannot separate the species from the geography. The Mithun is in Arunachal because the geography supports it. The desert fox is in arid regions. Geography dictates biology. If you understand the habitat, you don't have to just memorize a random list of animals. Their location makes logical sense.
So we have this incredible wealth, but it's disappearing. We've defined the endangered, the vulnerable. The big question for remains is always going to be why? And I feel like the answer is way more complex than just bad people shooting animals.
Oh, much, much more complex. And if we're going to look at this from a Maine's perspective, we need to build a narrative of destruction. And it's structural. To understand the structure, we have to look at history.
So we're talking about the colonial legacy, the British era.
The colonial period saw some of the greatest damage inflicted on Indian forests. But why? It wasn't just for sport, although hunting was rampant. It was primarily economic. It was for the expansion of railways, agriculture, commercial and scientific forestry, and mining.
Railways makes immediate sense.
Yeah.
You need wood for the sleepers, right? Those wooden blocks under the tracks.
An incredible amount of wood. Miles and miles of forests were cleared. Imagine the scale. Every single kilometer of track required hundreds of sleepers, and they needed hard, durable wood like sal and teak. So they went into these beautiful, diverse forests, cut down everything else, and prioritized these specific timber trees.
It was a purely extractive economy.
Completely. There was a 2014 GS1 mains question, I think it was question 6, that asked to examine critically the various facets of economic policies of the British in India.
And forestry would be a key facet of that. They basically commodified nature.
Absolutely. They didn't see a forest as a habitat, they saw it as a timber warehouse. And this led to something they called scientific forestry.
That sounds positive. Scientific usually implies progress.
It's one of the most ironic terms in environmental history. In this context, it was ecologically disastrous. It involved something called enrichment plantation.
What's that?
It's when you eliminate all the diverse, inferior species in a natural forest, the creepers, the bushes, the non-commercial trees, and you replace them with a single commercially valuable species.
So you're turning a complex jungle into a farm, a tree farm.
Precisely. For example, teak monoculture completely damaged the natural forests in South India. They just wiped out the mixed forests to plant neat rows of teak. In the Himalayas, they did the same with pine plantations.
And what did they replace?
They replaced the Himalayan oak and the rhododendron forests.
That is just heartbreaking. The Himalayan oak and rhododendron are so crucial for the water cycle, for holding the soil together.
They are. The oak holds water like a sponge in the soil. Pine leaves, on the other hand, are like needles. They dry out the soil and they're highly flammable, which leads to more forest fires. It completely changed the ecology. We're still dealing with the consequences of those fires today.
But we can't just pin this all on the British. They left in 1947. What have we done since then?
We largely continued the trend, unfortunately. Agricultural expansion has been a major cause of depletion. Between 1951 and 1980, according to the Forest Survey of India, over 26,200 square kilometers of forest area was converted into agricultural land.
26,000 square kilometers. That's an area larger than some small European countries.
It is. We needed to feed a growing population, that's undeniable, but the cost was the forest. And then you have practices like hum cultivation.
Shifting cultivation,
Yeah.
slash and burn.
Yes. It's common in the tribal belts of the northeast and central India. And while traditionally it was sustainable with very long cycles,
Right.
leaving the land alone for 20 years to recover.
Population pressure shortened the cycles.
Exactly. As the cycle shortened, it led to land degradation and deforestation. The soil just never gets a chance to heal properly.
Then we have development. The big, shiny projects, the River Valley projects.
Big dams. Since 1951, over 5,000 square kilometers of forest was cleared just for River Valley projects. Take the Narmada Sagar project in Madhya Pradesh. It drowned 40,000 hectares of forest. You drown the forest to light the cities.
And mining. I want to highlight a specific example the text gives here, the Buxa Tiger Reserve in West Bengal.
This is a critical case study. If you get a mains question on threats to biodiversity, you should absolutely cite Buxa.
What's the issue there?
The Buxa Tiger Reserve is being seriously threatened by ongoing dolomite mining. And it's not just about cutting trees. The constant activity, the noise, the pollution, it disturbs the natural habitat, and crucially, it blocks migration routes.
The text specifically mentions it blocking the migration route of the great Indian elephant.
Yes, so you have these massive intelligent animals that have used these corridors for generations, and suddenly there's a mine in the way. It creates massive human-wildlife conflict.
The elephants have nowhere to go, so
Yeah.
they wander into farms, and that leads to tragedy for both the farmers and the elephants.
Precisely. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, and maybe a bit controversial. The why isn't just about what we're doing. It's about who is using the resources.
The equity question.
Exactly. We need to talk about unequal consumption. There's a tendency in global environmental discourse to blame population growth in the so-called third world for everything. Oh, there are just too many people in India.
Right.
But the NCERT text makes a very sharp counterpoint to this.
It says an average American consumes 40 times more resources than an average Somalian.
40 times. And it makes a similar point within India. The richest 5% of Indians probably cause more ecological damage than the poorest 25%.
That's right.
Because the rich consume more. More fuel for bigger cars, more electricity for bigger houses, more manufactured goods, more air travel. The poor, on the other hand, depend directly on the land for survival, but they take far less in terms of sheer volume.
So the question, as the book puts it, is who is consuming what, from where, and how much?
That is the core mains perspective. Environmental degradation is an issue of equity as much as it is an issue of biology. If you're writing an essay on climate change or conservation, you cannot ignore this consumption disparity. It's not just about too many people, it's about too much greed and too much consumption.
Before we move on to the social impact of all this, I want to touch on one very specific plant mentioned in the text, the Himalayan yew.
Ah, yes, Taxus wallaceiana. This is a medicinal plant found in parts of Himachal Pradesh and Arunachal Pradesh. It produces a chemical compound called taxol.
And taxol's a big deal, right?
It's extracted from the bark, needles, twigs, and roots of the tree. And it's used to treat cancer. In fact, it's the biggest-selling anti-cancer drug in the world.
So we found a miracle cure in our forests.
We did. But because of this immense value, the species is now under extreme threat due to overexploitation. Thousands of yew trees have dried up in Himachal and Arunachal. It's a classic example of how discovering a resource can lead to the destruction of the source itself if it's not managed sustainably.
It's a tragedy of the commons, but for cancer medicine. We're literally killing the cure to sell the cure.
That's a powerful way to put it. And this brings us to the next logical step in our discussion. If the trees die and the animals die, what happens to us? Specifically, what happens to the most vulnerable among us?
Okay, let's shift gears then. We've talked about the flora and the fauna, but what happens to the people when the forest dies? This feels like a crucial link.
It's everything. This is what connects biology to society. The destruction of wildlife and forests is strongly, directly correlated with the loss of cultural diversity.
We often forget that part. For many communities, especially indigenous and tribal groups, their entire culture, their spirituality, their livelihood, it's all completely interwoven with the forest.
And when the forest goes, not only does the culture suffer, but poverty deepens. And there's a specific demographic that gets hit the hardest.
Women.
Women.
Let's unpack that. The gender impact. Why women specifically?
In many rural and forest-dependent societies, women bear the major responsibility for collecting the daily necessities of life: fuel, fodder for the animals, water. As these resources deplete, they don't just appear in a local store.
You have to walk further to find them.
Much further. The text uses the word drudgery, and that's exactly what it is. It talks about women walking more than 10 kilometers a day just to collect basic resources.
10 kilometers, that's a huge amount of time and physical effort.
It causes serious health problems, for one. But think about the social ripple effect. If a mother is spending half her day walking for water and firewood, she has less time to care for her children, less time for rest, less time for any other economic activity that could lift her family up. It locks the family into a cycle of poverty.
So environmental destruction directly leads to poverty. Things like droughts or deforestation-induced floods, they hit the poor the hardest.
Exactly. This is why conservation isn't just about saving a cute tiger for a poster. It is absolutely vital for the quality of life of millions of people. If the forest goes, the local water table drops, the fuel disappears, the fodder is gone, and the poor suffer immediately. The rich can just buy an LPG cylinder or bottled water. The poor cannot.
This brings me to a very recent and very relevant question. The 2025 GS1 Mains question 19 asked, and I'm quoting, "Achieving sustainable growth with emphasis on environmental protection could come into conflict with poor people's needs in a country like India." Comment.
What a beautiful question. It's beautiful because it forces you to confront this exact dilemma.
How would you approach that using what we've just discussed?
Well, on one hand, you have the conflict part. This happens when you have top-down conservation, the old model. You build a fence around a forest, call it a national park, and tell the local people, you can't gather wood here anymore because it's a tiger reserve. That creates conflict.
It displaces people and cuts off their livelihood.
Yes. But on the other hand, as we just discussed, the destruction of the environment hurts the poor the most in the long run. So a good answer would argue that true sustainable growth must include the needs of the poor because they are the first victims of environmental collapse.
So the conflict isn't inherent.
No. The conflict arises from the method of conservation, not the goal of conservation. You'd use the unequal access point from the NCERT. You'd argue that if you protect the environment in a way that includes the local community, you are actually protecting the water security, the fuel security, and the food security of the poor.
That is a brilliant insight. The conflict is in the method, not the goal. If your conservation strategy kicks people off their land, you create poverty. If your conservation strategy involves them, you might just alleviate it.
And that leads us perfectly into the next part of the chapter. Looking at how the state has tried to handle this, the story of Indian conservation policy is really the story of a slow transition from kicking people out to trying to work with people.
Speaking of methods, let's look at how the government of India has tried to fix this. It hasn't always been a perfect journey, I'm sure, but there have been some major moves.
The absolute watershed moment was the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972.
Okay, so before 1972, what was the situation? Was it just a free-for-all?
To a large extent, yes. In the 1960s and 70s, conservationists were demanding a national program. Before this act, hunting was often seen as a royal pastime, a sport. There were regulations, but they were patchy.
And the 1972 Act changed the game.
Completely. It created an all-India list of protected species, it banned hunting of these species, gave legal protection to their habitats, and severely restricted trade in wildlife. It created the legal framework for every national park and sanctuary we visit today.
And right on its heels, in 1973, came one of the most famous conservation programs in the world.
Project Tiger.
Why was it so urgent?
The numbers were terrifying. At the turn of the 20th century, the estimated tiger population in India was around 55,000.
55,000.
By 1973, it had dropped to just 1,827.
Wow. From 55,000 down to under 2,000. That's a collapse of epic proportions.
The threats were clear. Poaching for trade tiger skins were a luxury item, and their bones were used in traditional Asian medicine. Then there was shrinking habitat due to all the reasons we just discussed, and critically, the depletion of their prey base.
Right. If the deer die, the tigers die. This is a simple food web equation.
Precisely. So Project Tiger wasn't just about saving the tiger, it was about saving its entire ecosystem.
The text lists some key tiger reserves. Learners, you absolutely need to map these mentally. This is prime prelims material. Let's run through them. Corbett National Park.
In Uttarakhand, the first one, nestled in the foothills of the Himalayas.
Sundarbans National Park.
In West Bengal, the largest mangrove forest in the world, home to the famous Royal Bengal tiger that swims.
Bandhavgarh National Park.
That's in Madhya Pradesh in central India, known for having a very high density of tigers.
Sariska Wildlife Sanctuary.
In Rajasthan, in the arid Aravalli Hills. We'll talk more about Sariska later when we discuss community action.
Manas Tiger Reserve in Assam.
Up in the biodiversity hotspot of the Northeast.
And Periyar Tiger Reserve in Kerala.
Down south in the Western Ghats. Now, notice the geographic spread.
Himalayas, Delta, Central Highlands, Desert, Northeast, and Western Ghats.
Exactly. The idea of Project Tiger was to preserve entire biotypes of a sizable magnitude. By saving the tiger, which is an umbrella species, you automatically save everything that lives under that umbrella.
And the government didn't just stop at tigers.
No, the focus broadened. They launched similar projects for the one-horned rhinoceros, the Kashmir stag or Hangul, 3 types of crocodiles, the freshwater, the saltwater, and the gharial and the Asiatic lion.
And then they got even more specific.
Yes, very interestingly, the Wildlife Act was updated in 1980 and 1986, and for the first time, it included insects.
Insects. That seems so small compared to a tiger.
Yes, but so vital. Butterflies, moths, beetles, even one dragonfly were added to the protected list. It shows a growing understanding that biodiversity isn't just about the big, charismatic megafauna. If the pollinators die, the forest dies.
And in 1991, they added plants.
For the first time, 6 species of plants were added to the list. It shows a real evolution in thinking, from saving big animals to saving biodiversity as a whole system.
Okay, now administratively, how does the government categorize the forests themselves? I know we have reserved, protected, and unclassed. This is often a point of confusion for students. Can you break it down?
Let's clarify it because it's a crucial administrative distinction. First, you have reserved forests. This category covers more than half of the total forest land in India.
More than 50%.
Yes. And these are regarded as the most valuable from a conservation point of view. You find these heavily in states like Jammu and Kashmir, Andhra Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, and Maharashtra. In a reserved forest, generally, all activities like grazing or hunting are banned unless specifically permitted. It's the highest level of state protection.
Okay, so reserved equals most valuable. Strict protection. Got it. What about protected forests?
Protected forests make up about 1/3 of the total forest area. Here, the main goal is to protect them from any further depletion. States like Bihar, Haryana, Punjab, Himachal Pradesh, Odisha, and Rajasthan have a bulk of their forests under this category.
So it's still protected, but maybe not as stringently as a reserved forest.
In a way, yes. In protected forests, sometimes certain rights are given to local communities, like grazing, unless those activities are specifically prohibited. It's a slightly different legal framework.
And finally, unclassed forests.
These are basically all the other forests and wastelands that belong to both the government and private individuals or communities. This category has a very high percentage in the northeastern states and parts of Gujarat.
That northeast connection is key, right? It links back to the high degree of tribal and community control of land there.
Absolutely. In the Northeast, much of the forest is owned by the community, not just the state, so it falls under this unclassed category. Now, I want to briefly connect this to a 2015 prelims question, number 74. It asked about something called the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility and REDD plus DEM.
RDD plus MES. That's reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation.
Right. And while this is a global UN initiative, it links directly to how governments manage their forests. The whole idea is to provide financial incentives to developing countries to protect the carbon sinks that are their forests.
So it puts a monetary value on the carbon stored in those reserved and protected forests we just talked about.
Precisely. It turns conservation into a direct economic asset. Instead of getting cash by cutting the tree down for timber, you get cash for the service the tree provides by just standing there and storing carbon.
It's an attempt to counter that old colonial timber warehouse mentality.
It is. It's giving the forest value while it is still standing, a very important shift in perspective.
Okay, so we have the government doing its thing with acts and parks. But as we discussed with that 2025 mains question, top-down isn't always enough. Sometimes it even causes conflict. We need the people on board. Let's talk about community conservation, the Indian way.
This is where the story gets really inspiring, I think, because India has such a long and rich tradition of nature worship. We didn't need the IUCN to tell us to respect nature. It was already embedded in many cultures.
You mean things like sacred groves?
Exactly. Devaranya or God's Grove. These are patches of virgin forest that were preserved in the name of deities or ancestral spirits. In these areas, the local community traditionally bans all hunting and cutting. They protect everything.
It's ancient conservation biology, just wrapped in a cloak of religion and culture.
And it worked. These groves are often the last refuges for ancient, rare, and endemic species that have been wiped out everywhere else in the surrounding landscape. They're like little ecological museums. Then you have groups like the Bishnoi in Rajasthan.
The text mentions them fiercely protecting the black buck, the chinkara, and peacocks.
Fiercely is the right word. To the Bishnoi, these animals are sacred, part of their community. No one would dare hunt near a Bishnoi village. If you try, the entire village, men and women, will come out to stop you. They believe that trees and animals are as valuable as human life. It's an incredible conservation ethic.
And then, of course, the Chipko movement in the Himalayas. Everyone knows that iconic image of women hugging trees to stop the loggers.
But it's important to look at the result. It didn't just stop deforestation. It also proved that community-led afforestation using indigenous species was successful.
So they challenged the government's pine plantation logic.
Directly. They said, no, we don't want your commercial pine trees. We want our oaks and rhododendrons back, the trees that give us fodder, fuel, and water. It was an ecological movement as much as it was a social one.
And there's also the Beej, Bachao, Andolan, and Terry Save the Seeds movement.
Yes, along with groups like Navdanya. They demonstrated that adequate levels of diversified crop production can be achieved without using synthetic chemicals and pesticides. It was a direct challenge to the Green Revolution's monoculture model.
They were showing that biodiversity is also good for agriculture, not just for forests.
And that traditional seeds are resilient. They're adapted to the local climate, they're pest-resistant. They were making a case for agrobiodiversity.
But sometimes the community has to fight both the government and the private sector. The text brings up the Sariska Tiger Reserve again in this context.
Yes, and this is a fascinating case. In Sariska, the villagers actually fought against mining operations in their area, and they did it by citing the Wildlife Protection Act.
So they used the government's own law against a project that the government might have otherwise allowed.
It's a really interesting inversion. The citizens using the state's own legal tools to protect the land. It shows a high level of awareness and empowerment.
But the ultimate model of cooperation seems to be joint forest management, or JFM.
This is the answer to the conflict we discussed earlier. JFM was a major policy shift. It started formally in Odisha in 1988.
And how does the deal work? What is joint about it?
So the Forest Department still owns the land, usually degraded forest land that needs restoration. The local village institutions take on the responsibility to protect and manage it. They form a committee.
And what do they get in return for their efforts?
In return, the community gets intermediary benefits. They're entitled to collect non-timber forest produce, things like gum, honey, wax, medicinal herbs, and crucially, they get a share in the profits from the timber harvest when the forest is eventually managed or harvested sustainably.
So it's a simple, powerful principle. If you protect it, you profit from it.
Exactly. It aligns the economic interest of the poor with the conservation interest of the state. It gives them a stake in the health of the forest.
And bringing this all the way back to that 2025 mains question about the conflict between environment and the needs of the poor.
JFM is the model answer. It's the practical example that shows that environmental protection and the needs of the poor do not have to be in conflict. Through institutions like JFM, they can be mutually supportive. The poor get a sustainable livelihood. The state gets its forest cover back. It turns conflict into cooperation.
That is a powerful conclusion. It's not about nature versus humans. It's about finding ways for humans with nature.
It's the only sustainable path forward. There is no other way.
Okay, let's just zoom out for a second and recap what we've covered in this pretty comprehensive deep dive.
We started with the crisis, the story of the missing cheetah, and that stark statistic about 10% of our flora being threatened.
Right. Then we broke down the IUCN categories. From vulnerable to extinct, which are just so essential for your prelims.
We then dug into the causes, the why. And it wasn't just hunting. It was the deep structural issues, the colonial legacy of railways and scientific forestry, the post-independence agricultural expansion, the river valley projects, and mining in sensitive places like Buxa.
Then we talked about the social cost, how environmental destruction isn't an abstract problem, but one that directly increases the drudgery of women and entrenches poverty.
And finally, we looked at the dual solutions. The top-down government approach, like the Wildlife Protection Act and Project Tiger,
Versus the bottom-up, community-led approaches from the sacred groves and the Bishnoi to the modern framework of joint forest management.
and we made sure to link it all to how it appears in the exams, the Barasinga and Kanha, the British economic policies, and that crucial mains question on the conflict between growth and the poor.
Now, before we sign off, we always like to leave you with a final provocative thought to chew on.
The NCERT text itself poses a very powerful question. Who is consuming what, from where, and how much? We often hear the narrative that overpopulation in the developing world is the primary cause of the climate and environmental crisis. But just remember that statistic we mentioned earlier. One average American consumes as much as 40 average Somalians.
So the question really is the crisis about too many people? Or is it about a small number of people consuming way, way too much?
It's a question of lifestyle. It's a question of consumption patterns. And as India continues to develop, which model are we going to follow? The high consumption Western model or a uniquely Indian model that respects the limits of nature? That's something for you to ponder as you write your essays.
Deep stuff. We really hope this deep dive helps you structure your UPSC preparation and gives you that extra edge.
And a final reminder. Please, if you found this useful, subscribe to Simplified UPSC by PPP. It is the single best way to support what we do.
And if you're in a position to do so, please consider supporting us on Patreon. It keeps the lights on and the content flowing for everyone.
Don't forget to like this deep dive and leave us a comment. Let us know what topic you'd like us to tackle next. It genuinely helps the algorithm.
And go check the Telegram channel. Those free notes and practice PYQs are there waiting for you. For the premium experience, all the videos, detailed notes, extra PYQs, and those model means answers we talked about, join the private Telegram library. Just DM us on the public channel to join.
Until next time.
Happy learning.